Hey everyone, this is Darla Harms, and I'm here with Mandy Ringer. Welcome to the Darla and
Hello.
Mandy show. We are back. And so, Mandy, I'm going to let you kick us off this time.
Yes. So last time we spoke, we talked about the difference between leadership and management because you and I had a conversation prior to this initial conversation, and I was curious what the difference was. And so you were super helpful. You explained it. And my question that we left with last episode was, how do you lead effectively in a virtual world? Because my guess is that there are probably a lot of folks out there that are having to lead teams, lead organizations, lead countries,
Right.
counties. I mean, schools. Everyone is leading at some point in their life, whether it's their families or at work. And maybe it's even nonprofit volunteer group. So, how do
Absolutely.
you lead in this virtual world? That's my big question.
That's a great question. And I think it's one that a lot of people are asking right now because we are in a different kind of situation, and that's okay. I'm not loving COVID, but I'm saying we need to be where we are and we need to be all in with what we're doing. And so, first of all, I just want to make sure we're clear on the definition of leadership because I think that's going to impact how people perceive this particular conversation. And so, I love, of course, I am John Maxwell, certified speaker, trainer, and coach. That's one of my many um, trainings that I've had over the years to become a leadership trainer, speaker, author, and coach. So his definition is that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. It's influence. It's how you are projecting yourself to your people. It's your ability. Like I like to think of it like this: influence is like a string between you and I. If we had a string connecting us, and now that string could be like, I don't know, dental floss thin, I guess, and if something happened between the two of us, that string would disconnect easily. It's flimsy, there's nothing there really. Now, if I had a rope that had three strands and it was tied and I was holding it and you were holding it and something happened, the chances of us being able to hang on to that rope are much better because it's got influence. It has something sturdy holding it up that keeps us together. And so influence is like that rope. How thick is the rope between you and I, or between you and your people? If it's flimsy, if there's nothing to it, if there isn't a lot of influence, chances are when this crisis hit our country, your people, your influence really waned. And if your rope was tight and you had strong influence with your people, that probably pulled them all together. That
Is
would
it
be my
po-
basic assumption.
okay? Is it possible to have a lot of influence over your team, but not be a good leader?
Well, you can have good influence or you can have bad influence. I mean, think about just historically speaking, some of the worst. Let's think of someone like an Adolf Hitler. He had influence, but was it the right influence? No, he was still a leader. Now, people may disagree with me on that, but he led people. Look at his followers. But it wasn't the right kind of influence. It wasn't, there was no integrity. It was narcissistic, psychopathic. I mean, there's no words to describe his influence really other than just absolute destructive. So, sure, you can be a leader and still have negative influence. But the influence I'm talking about is positive influence. Let's take someone like Martin Luther King, positive, high character, highly driven. By the way, historically speaking, Adolf Hitler and Martin Luther King have the same personality types,
Wow.
but it's how they used it in influence to get things done. So you have an unbelievable man like Martin Luther King who inspired, who had vision, who compelled people towards something unbelievable. It changed cultures, it changed society. Because of his movement, they rewrote laws. I mean, um, the voting laws were changed, schools were integrated. I mean, we have come so far because of his vision and his influence. And now his influence has left a legacy. People still, we celebrate him, we honor him, we We try to model leadership after him to some degree. He has set a standard of positive influence, while we're trying all to forget what happened with Adolf Hitler and that whole fiasco. Now they have museums to honor those affected by his negative influence, and should, but we don't honor him. His legacy is dead with him. And so influence can be powerful in many different aspects, good or bad. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. I'm just thinking in terms of being an effective leader, if you have influence and it isn't as positive as you would like, what is the result of really getting your people to do more or better? Or maybe the real question is, are they happy? Because my guess is if you have a leader that is mostly respected and has positive influence, are those organizations stronger? Are they more
Absolutely.
profitable? Are they doing better? I mean,
Yeah, they make more money. Sure. And a lot of companies that are negative look at the bottom line, and they might listen. You can be a millionaire and have negative influence. Money is not always the deciding factor about your ability to influence people. But I love Maxwell's particular concepts in 21 Laws of Leadership, because he talks in terms of consequences. One day I had to pick my son up from the 9th grade campus. This was a few years ago. And I was late, and he's waiting for me outside to get him. And school traffic is just a nightmare anyway. Nobody likes it. It's a drag. And so, but I'm really running behind. And I get behind a garbage truck in the middle of a school zone during pickup time. And your garbage trucks go and stop, and they're so slow. And I'm behind and I'm in a hurry. So I look around, there's no cars coming. I'm just going to go around it and zoom into the school parking lot. So I gun it, and I zoomed right around him. I went, and lo and behold, over here sitting in the bushes was a cop car, and I got pulled over because I was speeding through a school zone, and I got a ticket, and I deserved it because I didn't even notice the sign, right? I didn't notice the sign. And even though I've driven that path many times, there's a sign, it's school zone, it's blinking, it's 25 miles an hour. I'm not going to tell you how fast I was going because it's ridiculous. So he was super nice. I didn't get off with speeding in a school zone. I think I got some other lesser offense because I only had one other speeding ticket in my entire life. And that was when I was 18. Of course, that was a long, long time ago. So he was super nice and let me off the hook a little bit, but I did have to pay $135. So there are consequences to breaking the law. Now that's kind of a less offense. I didn't break the law that bad. It was $135. I took care of it. It's over. But now if I didn't pay my speeding ticket and I got pulled over again, the consequences increase because I keep breaking the particular laws that are there to protect me and to protect society. So leadership is exactly the same way. There are laws, there are things that you should do as a leader. And if you don't do it, you're going to pay the consequence for that. And listen, just like going through that school zone, there are signs, there are blinking signs all over the place. They give you a warning before something bad happens. And if you ignore it like I did, you're going to pay a consequence, and it's going to feel like you are in leadership jail. Because people don't like you, you get the least amount of resistance or effort from them. They resist you, they leave, you probably have high turnover, there's a lot of conflict and drama. So those consequences can really, you throw a crisis like COVID into that. I tell people all the time, if you want to see what's inside someone, all you have to do is squeeze. And what I'm telling you, whatever influence you have learned and built up over the years, however you've learned to influence people, it's going to pop out even stronger during a crisis. So you better make sure your influence is good, that you're working on it and building it and establishing it. Because when a crisis hits, that's when it matters the most. That's what people are going to see. And if you haven't been working on your influence and you're an angry, bitter, complaining, whining, negative, yelling, screaming boss or leader, if you want to call yourself that, when you squeeze, that's exactly what's going to come out.
So how can you, let's just say for argument's sake, you have good influence. And I would guess that it's kind of like, and I don't know if you've heard this before, like, what does everyone think of themselves? We'll just pull up any dating website and everyone thinks that they're beautiful and they're above average. And so
Right.
perhaps sometimes perception is skewed. And so we all think that we are offering great influence and we are maybe awesome leaders. And let's pretend that that is a true statement. So you've had a good foundation, you go into the crisis, now you're virtual. What are some tips or some things that you can share with the audience that they can take away and actually maybe help implement and at least coach their team and lead their team as the pandemic has continued to unfortunately go on?
Absolutely. Well, I think the most important thing is to know that this is a season. This is not forever. This is a season. There will be something at the end of it. We're all not sure what that looks like. I keep hearing the phrase new normal. I don't know. I don't know that I care right this second. All I know is that there's a season that we're in, and how you approach the season has everything to do with your mindset. And you can be bitter and angry. Like, even you and I were talking about this the other day about how people have looked at 2020 and they're like, oh, it sucks. It's been a terrible year. This has been the worst ever. And you and I are like, you know what? Yeah, it's been hard, but there are some good things that have happened in 2020. For me professionally, I started Small Town Girls Play Big. It's been a great career transition for me. Absolutely best career decision I've ever made to start this company. Closer to my family than I have ever been.
I'm
Meeting
loving
women.
2020.
Yeah, I don't love COVID, of course, and I
No.
feel bad for people that have, we've felt the effects of COVID in our own household, and I don't need to go into all of that, but we've had some things happen to us that have been very difficult. But it's just a season. It is not forever. So I can look at it as an opportunity to grow, or I can resist the opportunity and just sit and complain. And here's the thing about that. What people need to understand is that in your mind, whatever you think about becomes a habit. So if you think negatively about this particular situation, you're going to think negatively about every other difficult situation that you approach or that happens to you or happens in your life. So we can lean into this opportunity and learn from it and become better people because of it, or we can resist it, complain about it, gripe about it, which it's not helping anybody. That's not helping the situation get better.
Well, I definitely think there's, and if you look back probably in your life, if I've looked back in my life, if I am thinking about good things, more good things show up. And if I'm grateful about all the things I have, more good things show up. So I think part of it too is that law of attraction a little bit. So
I agree. And that law, right? That's a law. And if you don't obey that law, you're going to have consequences. So the law of the attraction is simply from a Maxwell quote. He says the law of attraction is you get what you are, not what you want. Whatever you are is what you attract. So if you're negative, complaining, upset, whiny, bitter, that's what you attract into your life, because that's what you send out to the world. And if you're grateful, and by the way, gratitude is one of those emotions that actually can change the physiological makeup of the brain. Gratitude changes things in your life from an internal perspective and an external perspective. So being grateful for your family, oh my goodness. I love my family more than ever. I'm so grateful that we have been together in this virtual environment. When we were on lockdown, we play Texas Hold'em at my house. So, I'm playing Texas Hold'em with my teenagers and my husband, got the dogs. I mean, just having a blast, watching stupid movies, playing card games, talking more than I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. So talking to them, it could seem so hard, but now I mean, we've got great communication between us and our kids. And I give credit to COVID for that, this whole situation.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think, there are definitely some positives that have come out of, again, it's what we just talked about. When you can see the good in a situation that might not appear good, or what
Right.
you feel is good, if you can really see the good, then you get more comes in, and there's more to be grateful for. So you started off by saying, in order to lead well in this virtual environment, having the right mindset is step one, is what I heard. Is that
Yeah,
probably
step
an
one,
accurate
and yeah, it's all about mindset. And I want to share the story. It's called the Stockdale paradox. And so the Stockdale paradox is a great story about a gentleman, Admiral James Stockdale, who was a POW during the Vietnam War. And his story is so inspirational. So I'm looking at my notes here. I want to make sure I get it absolutely right. Stockdale said he never doubted not only that he would get out, but also that he would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of his life. And in retrospect, he wouldn't have traded anything. So
Wow.
looking back, he would have been like, okay, I wouldn't trade that experience. I think he was there for 7 years. And
Mm,
2 of those years he spent in shackles. So he wouldn't trade that because it taught him something. And I don't want to go through something like that, but he developed a mindset and leaned into learning from the experience it because it helped him become a better person. And so he shares a little bit about the POW camp and how the people who survived are the ones, they weren't the ones, they were super optimistic at first. Like they would say, we're going to get out by Christmas. And then Christmas would come and go. And then they would say, well, we're going to be out by Easter. And those were the ones who actually ended up dying because they weren't living in reality. The reality was nobody knew when they were going to get out. That was his mindset. He just knew he would get out someday.
mm,
And he didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn from every day. Now, when the end came, and he refused to be negative or think the worst. So that's mindset. And he just knew he had to deal with the reality of the moment, knowing eventually his reality would change.
mm-hmm.
So that is how we lead a team virtually, leaders. We look at the reality of the moment. What is happening now? Do not ignore it. You have to deal with reality. Your team is scared. Your team is frustrated. They want some certainty in this time. They need you to lead them. They don't need you to manage them. So we talked about the difference in our last session. Okay, processes and procedures are so important. They get all their paperwork done. They're calling the customers, whatever their job description is. But now they need inspiration. Now they need you to challenge them. Now they need you to listen. Now they need your meetings to go maybe a little bit longer. So you can say, hey, how's your family doing? Is everybody okay? Oh, somebody in your family is sick. Let's talk about that. What do you need from me? So in a crisis, we want people to slow down and live in the moment, knowing that eventually it's going to get better. So mindset is absolutely the first step. And I love that. You can Google it, the Stockdale Paradox. It's also I have this book on my desk. It's Good to Great by Jim Collins. Fantastic book. Everybody needs to read that book. He shares about the Stockdale Paradox. And I know a lot of other leaders like Michael Hyatt people, they love that paradox and they use that frequently to teach how to lead through a crisis. So it's a great principle and absolutely has to do with mindset. So the second thing you're going to need to do is over communicate. So just when you think you have communicated at your best, you're only halfway there. So if you're going to communicate with your team during this virtual you can't just shoot out an email. You've got to over communicate. You have to simplify things and you have to break things down and make sure people on the other end have heard you. They're listening. So one of the things I've noticed on Zoom calls, I have my phone right here. You can see people look down during a Zoom call, they're looking at their phone. Or sometimes on a Zoom call, I can tell if people are watching TV because they keep looking up. I've had people on Zoom calls fall asleep.
Wow.
Or I've known companies, I've been a part of sessions where people, their heads will nod. Okay, you need to make sure your people are paying attention. So leaders, make sure you are holding your people to a standard of leaning in. So make sure their phones are to the side unless they need them for the meeting. Make sure, like right here is my notebook. I have this with me on every meeting because I keep a journal. It's a personal and work journal. I take all my notes here, personal and professional. It's right here at my desk. Because Mandi, today you may say something absolutely brilliant that I can use in a future training, and I want to make sure I catch it. So it's right here. So I'm old school. I like to write things down. Maybe people like to use their phone, but I have seen people on trainings in Zoom calls that aren't taking notes. So I would expect my team to lean in and take notes, pay attention to what's going on. So if anything, the virtual environment has taught me is the need to listen better and ask more questions. I have a company that I work for. It's called the Southwest Georgia Council on Aging. They've been clients of mine for 3 years. They impact the elderly in 14 different counties in the state of Georgia. They're a terrific organization. Izzy Sadler is their director. She's a phenomenal leader, and she has navigated this virtual environment very well. And I've been privileged to watch her do it. And one thing, so here's a great nugget for you, is she, when her team is frustrated, let's say they have an email chain going on, and she can just tell they're not communicating at all. They're missing the boat. What they do is they call a huddle, and a huddle is when it's a phone call. It's, you know what, stop emailing and let's pick up the phone and talk to each other. It takes 5 minutes to clarify what we're spending, how much time typing, going back and forth and reading, when you can just pick up the phone, have your huddle and be done and get your answer.
Yeah.
But the other thing that took was that her team had to ask for help, and they weren't good at that before the crisis. They were really good at letting people solve the problems for them. But during the crisis, they had to step up and say, you know what, I need help from this department because I don't know the answer. And what it's done is created an incredible level of communication now, because now people have risen up and they're advocating more for what they want and what they need, instead of letting things slide or just being content with an email. They're asking clarifying questions. And Izzy expects everyone on her Zoom trainings to be paying attention, leaning in, listening, and taking notes.
Well, I think that's great. And I love the huddle. And I think that oftentimes it is a lot easier just to pick up the phone. And so that's a little bit of a challenge. And maybe we talk about that in the next Darla Mandi show, about how you actually communicate with people, because sometimes I think it's easier to hide behind these devices than it is to pick up a phone and make that phone call. So the courage is certainly something there. You know, I know you're offering such great information, and we're about, we're about at our time limit here. So we've got step 1, we've got step 2. Is there a step 3? I think you had a few more ideas. Do we need to extend this into part 2?
Well, I've got one more. So if I could have 2 more minutes, or we can do a whole other Darla and Mandi show with the next step, because it actually is a pretty big step.
Let's hear it. We're ready.
So the step is it's called way of being. And way of being is your presence, the atmosphere that you bring to every situation. It's the deepest part of you that decides the worth and value of yourself and other human beings. It's this.
It's your energy. It's what you're giving off.
Yeah, it's your energy. And that takes a lot of work. I learned way of being from another company that I have a certification with called the Arbinger Institute. And they talk about how your way of being, it really goes with the law of attraction. Because if you are deep down in your soul a negative person, you cannot hide it. You can say all the right things, but you can't hide the energy behind it because it oozes out of you. And so if you're an angry, bitter person, negative individual, and you say, I really appreciate you, you're going to know they're full of crud. It doesn't feel authentic.
I was going to say, it seems like it doesn't match the authenticity of the actual.
Yeah, it doesn't match it, what's going on inside of them. And so there's a disconnect between you and I've met people like this, Mandi, who I've got a family member that can say all the right things, but historically and in her way of being, it's negative. You know, she's full of it. So you don't believe her. She may have said, boy, you look really nice today. But there's, she doesn't mean it. And so people are super smart about that kind of stuff. They can feel that inside of you. So whatever is deeply authentic about you comes out in your way of being. And so if you don't like people, listen, I've heard so many leaders say, this is so hard to hear. I love being a leader, but I don't like people. Like you can't be a leader and not like people. That doesn't go together. And by the way, your people know that you don't like them because it's your way of being. It just came out of your soul. It just came out from that deepest part of you. And so, I would love to go to work, but people are stupid. Okay, well, if you think that, it's going to show up in your way of being. You can't do that. You could tell your kids to clean their room, but your way of being, if you yell and scream and call them every name in the book, your way of being interrupted the message of, hey, you need to clean your room. They didn't hear clean your room. What they heard was your way of being. And so in a virtual environment, we have got to work on our way of being. I mean, we got to get some sleep. You got to eat healthy. I'm not doing so hot on that one. Just got to keep it real. You got to read really good material, like reading good books or listening to podcasts or talking to really positive people like you, Mandi. That has changed. That has helped me so much protect my way of being. And honestly, we are made for relationship as human beings. So making sure you have the right relationships around you during this time to protect your way of being and fill your cup up is so important. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that was fantastic. I agree that, absolutely surrounding yourself with the right people. The one thing I was going to add, what you were saying about way of being, is I think each of us have our own way of taking care of ourselves. And it's easy to get caught up in taking care of everyone else. I think as women, that might be a female statement, maybe not so much men, at least based on my experience. Most of the time men are pretty good at just saying, I'm going to get this done and do it, and not always worry about what everyone else is doing or how they can help. Or whereas women, we're probably a little more inclusive, and so we take on more potentially. But at the end of the day, what I heard you say was you have to take care of you, and that might it would help to eat healthy, or, I think we all have our thing. I know what my thing is, and what keeps my head clear, which might not be your thing. And it might not be, the person down the road's thing. So figuring out what that is that brings you to that place where you're feeling good about you. You're happy, you're at peace, you're, whatever word you want to use to describe it. You have to do whatever it is that takes care of you. And that inadvertently will help your way of being, is kind of what I heard.
Absolutely, totally agree. It's different for every person. And so if we judge how other people do it, it's actually affecting our way of being. So what works for you, Mandy, probably doesn't work for me, and vice versa.
Yeah, and my crazy what works for me probably doesn't work for most people. Most people are like, "What are you doing? It's 19 degrees outside, and you're gonna go run." And that's what makes me happy. Yep, get up at 5 a.m. Let's get it
I'm
done.
not going.
So,
No, I'll get up
yeah.
at 5 a.m. to read a book. I actually, during COVID, I used to get up at 5. Now I'm up at 6:30. So I kind of like moved my bedtime
Yeah.
a little bit.
COVID time.
Oh, well.
Well, this has been extremely helpful. I'm sure there are lots of leaders out there that are taking notes and probably going to rewatch this. At least they should. Next time, I don't know what we'll talk about yet, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So hopefully everyone tunes in. And round 3 is the magic number. So it'll be good.
Love it. Thanks for joining the Darla and Mandy show.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.